The opening scene features a cellular biology professor and former U.S. Army soldier named Lena, who is in a containment cell. She is being interrogated by the lab researchers in hazmat suits, while a large group of people are gathered outside listening in. One of the researchers, named Lomax, questions Lena about how she managed to survive her 2-month expedition despite only having food for 2 weeks. In response, Lena says that she doesn't recall eating at all during the mission. Moreover, she claims that she stayed there only for a few days or a week. Lomax then inquires about the rest of her team members, but she remembers nothing. The scene then cuts to some years before the expedition, and we see a meteor soaring up in space before it makes its way into Earth's surface. It lands in a lighthouse in Florida and soon starts to emit a mysterious glow, gradually expanding its boundaries. 3 years after this event and sometime before the expedition, Lena is shown delivering a biology lecture to her students about cell division and its origin. After class, her colleague Daniel invites her to a barbecue at his house, but she turns him down with an excuse. She doesn't want Daniel's meat, smoked or otherwise. Daniel reminds her that it's been a year since she lost her husband, Kane, and that it's not disrespectful to his memory for her to spend some time with friends. However, Lena still declines the invitation and leaves. Back home, Lena sobs in memory of her husband, a Green Beret who was apparently killed in action. She then begins painting her bedroom when Kane unexpectedly shows up. She's overjoyed to see him alive and runs over to hug him tight, but Kane behaves differently. Later on, she asks him several questions about where he was for such a long time and if he was on a secret mission. However, Kane looks perplexed and doesn't respond to any of her questions. When Lena asks about how he got back home, he responds that he found himself outside the room and saw the door open. Just then, Kane takes a sip of water and says that he isn't feeling well, as evidenced by the blood in the water. Seeing this, Lena calls an ambulance to rush him to the hospital. En route, the police cars block their path and proceed to take Kane away. Lena tries to stop them, but they inject her with a sedative, rendering her unconscious. Afterwards, Lena regains her consciousness and finds herself in a government facility called Area X. There, she is approached by the head of the department, named Dr. Ventress, who introduces herself as a psychologist and works for an organization called the Southern Reach. Ventress then asks Lena about her husband's mission and how he returned, but the latter is oblivious. Lena demands to know what's going on, and Ventress shows her a mysterious glowing zone called the Shimmer, caused by a meteor. She explains that the Shimmer's boundaries are expanding, and if it's not stopped, it will engulf all cities as well as states. According to Ventress, Kane was part of a secret expedition to the Shimmer, and he is apparently the only person to have returned. His entire team is reported as dead or missing, but sadly, Kane is also suffering from multiple organ failure and massive internal bleeding. Later that night, as Lena is recalling some happy memories spent with her husband, a paramedic named Anya approaches her. The latter introduces Lena to 2 of her friends, a geomorphologist named Cass and a postdoctoral physicist named Josie. Finally, Lena also introduces herself as a Johns Hopkins biologist. She soon discovers that they all will be entering the Shimmer, with Ventress leading the group. Lena asks the women what they think happened with the previous expeditions. In response, Anya speculates that those who entered the zone were either killed by something or they went insane and killed each other. When Cass mentions about a military personnel who was able to return, Lena stays silent and chooses not to reveal that it was her husband. The next morning, Lena approaches Ventress and requests to let her join them in the expedition, to which she agrees. In the next scene, all 5 women suit up and walk towards the Shimmer with guns in their hands. Surprisingly, as soon as they enter, they wake up in a tent 3 or even 4 days later. They have no recollection of what happened in the interim. They also discover that their navigation and signaling devices are no longer functional. After this, with the help of the sun and time, they all walk towards the south. Eventually, they arrive at a swamp where they notice different species of flowers and hopefully not Shrek. Upon closer examination, Lena is surprised to discover that they are all growing from the same branch. In the meantime, meantime, Josie investigates a small hut, but suddenly a creature drags her into the water. Everyone rushes to her assistance and successfully manages to pull her out. A few moments later, they notice a massive alligator charging towards them. Using her military skill, Lena continuously shoots the alligator until it stops moving. After this, she examines the crocodile's mouth and discovers shark teeth in it. It appears that there may have been some kind of crossbreeding occurring within the Shimmer. Following this, they all board 2 boats and continue their journey towards their destination, the lighthouse. Lena rides with Cass, during which they talk about their past. Lena shares that she was in the army and also that her husband was KIA. In turn, Cass mentions that she lost her daughter due to leukemia. She also reveals things about the rest of the team members, like Anya, who is a recovering addict, and Josie, who had tried to commit the unthinkable. She further adds that nobody seems to know much about Ventress, other than the fact that she doesn't have any friends or family. After a while, the group arrives at Fort Amaya, a military base which was the previous headquarters of the Southern Reach before the Shimmer engulfed it. The deeper they go, the more mutations they discover, much like tumors. As they enter the building, they learn that the previous expedition team had also used the place as a camp. Upon further investigation, they discover a microchip, probably left by the previous group. As they insert it into their device, they find a video in which Kane is seen dissecting his fellow soldier's stomach to reveal the swollen intestine moving like a snake. In another part of the building, they discover a soldier's upper body, which is separated from its lower body and covered in fungi. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a movie. Just look at it. Would you just look at it? Josie doesn't want to stay there anymore after these discoveries, but Ventress asserts that they've got no choice as it's getting dark. That night, Lena is reminded of her husband's unusual behavior just before leaving for the mission, which makes her unable to sleep. So she wakes up and starts examining a cell sample she gathered earlier. As she studies via microscope, she is shocked to see that the cells are dividing rapidly, unlike the normal cells do. Shortly after, she goes to talk to Ventress, who is keeping watch. Lena asks why her husband volunteered for the mission, to which Ventress indirectly implies that he might have had some issues with the marriage. Hearing this, Lena realizes that her husband must have found out about her affair with Daniel, which is why Kane decided to join the mission. Oh, she smoked Daniel's meat, after all. Soon after, the 2 women are startled by a noise. Cass also wakes and comes over to investigate. While checking around, a massive bear-like creature appears from behind and takes Cass away. In the morning, Josie and Anya decide to return back to the facility because they've already been attacked twice. However, Ventress refuses to do so and prepares to head towards the lighthouse alone. Lena also wants to reduce her guilt by continuing, so she persuades Josie and Anya not to back out. Then they all follow Ventress and proceed forward through the forest. A while later, they come across Cass's shoe, prompting Lena to venture deeper alone. At one point, she notices 2 identical deers whose horns appear to be mutated with flowers. As she continues her search, she discovers Cass's mangled body lying by a tree. In the next scene, Lena returns to her team and informs them of the situation, after which they continue with their journey. When it starts getting dark, the group decides to stop, and in that location, they discover plants that have taken on a humanoid form. Josie then starts connecting the dots in her mind and theorizes that the Shimmer functions as a prism, refracting anything that falls within its boundaries, including human DNA. According to Josie, this is the reason behind crossbreeding and mutation between different species. After this, they all walk to a nearby abandoned house to spend the night. The group falls asleep, except for Anya, who gets paranoid to notice her fingerprint moving. Just then, she discovers a picture of Kane in Lena's necklace and realizes that he's her husband. Sensing the betrayal, she attacks and knocks her out. Shortly after, Lena wakes up to find herself tied to a chair, along with Josie and Ventress. Anya accuses Lena for Cass's death and intends to kill her, but right then, they hear Cass's crying voice, asking for help, prompting them to rush to it. The next thing the group hears is a roaring sound. Shortly after, the same colossal and mutated bear enters the house and starts circling them. It turns out that Cass's voice is coming from the same bear because of the gene fusion. The bear, with the horrifying sound of Cass's voice, says, "I'm smarter than your average bear." The bear tries to devour Lena, but Anya, who is now wounded by the bear's attack, walks in with a gun. She tries to shoot the bear, but the creature instead tears her apart. The bear then returns to Lena, but Josie somehow manages to free herself and shoots the bear to death. Ventress fears that she wouldn't make it to the lighthouse if she stays with the group, so she sets off towards the lighthouse alone. In the morning, Lena finds Josie out in the yard and informs her that she found mutations in her blood. Josie believes that the mutations will soon be inside everyone. She checks the roots and leaves that are sprouting on her arm and starts walking away. Lena pursues her, attempting to stop her, but Josie soon disappears. She probably mutates into one of the humanoid plants. Now that she's all alone, Lena finally reaches the coast and notices the lighthouse from a distance. As she approaches it, she notices numerous skulls and skeletons lying outside. Lena enters the lighthouse and finds another charred skeleton sitting against the wall with a camera pointing at it. Upon playing the video, she sees Kane sitting down as he holds a phosphorus grenade. Kane says that he doubts his own identity as his sense of reality appears to have been warped. He asks the person behind the camera to take care of Lena before he pulls the pin on the grenade and blows himself up. Following this, the person behind the camera walks into view and is revealed to be some kind of clone of Kane. This makes Lena realize that Kane, whom she previously met, was a doppelganger. All these revelations break Lena down, but she still continues on her mission. She goes further into the lighthouse and finds Ventress, whom appears to be mutating. Ventress tells Lena that the shimmer is of alien origin and that it's preparing for an annihilation. Now that she's said the name of the movie, she's got nowhere to go, so her body starts to dissolve into a bright form of light. During this transformation, she absorbs a drop of blood from Lena's face and changes into a faceless, shimmering humanoid. In a state of panic, Lena starts firing towards it, but it's unaffected. Out of fear, she bails from the tunnel, but the humanoid form teleports in front of her. Lena tries to fight, but the entity fights back. After a while, Lena realizes that the creature is not attacking her, but is simply mirroring her actions. Lena attempts to run out, but the entity grabs her and continues to mimic her. Amidst this, Lena finds a grenade and comes up with an idea. She slowly hands over the grenade to the entity, which has started to resemble her slowly. Lena pulls out its pin and rushes out of the lighthouse, leaving it to detonate. The entity spreads the fire, causing the whole lighthouse to burn. Eventually, the entire shimmer fades away. The scene then cuts to the ongoing interrogation back in the present. Lomax, who thinks that it was an alien, asks what they wanted. In response, Lena claims that they didn't want anything, as they were simply mutating everything to create a new environment. Following this, Lomax tells her that after the shimmer disappeared, Kane recovered on his own. Lena then goes to his room and asks if he is really Kane, which he doubts. However, he recognizes her as Lena, and they share a hug. As they continue to embrace, their eyes shimmer, indicating that they are both mutated. If you dug that premise but thought the ending was pretty bad, try checking out the book that the story's based on. It's by an author named Jeff Vandermeer, and it's still very weird, but it's amazing. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.